Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin. I'm joined again by Jeff Berkowitz, and I will tell the audience, Jeff, that after our last show, literally within about an hour after we recorded it, the decision came down in the trial against Donald Trump in New York. And so on paper, Donald Trump is now a convicted felon in that trial, those charges brought by prosecutor Alvin Bragg in New York City. Jeff and I are going to be taking a look at the ramifications of that. Jeff, you would think after being found guilty of a felony, or actually 34 felonies, that it would be a pretty bad week for Donald Trump and his effort to become president. But oddly enough, just the opposite has happened. We're going to be talking about that. Let's take a look to what happened. One of the things that happened was the fundraising response from the public, who apparently expressed their frustration and disbelief with what is going on in the prosecution of Trump by giving money to the president's campaign. We hear from Lara Trump, the President Trump's daughter-in-law and co-chair of the RNC.
American people came out, and in 48 hours after Donald Trump's verdict was read, our campaign and the RNC raised $70 million in digital fundraising. This is small dollar donations. And I think the amazing statistic to take out of that is that 30% of that money came in from people who had never once donated to Donald Trump. People are very upset about what they saw happen this week to someone should never have had a case brought against him. We all know that if his name had been anything other than Donald Trump, this case would have never seen the light of day.
And that was Lara Trump on CNN.
Well, Terry, the name of the game is credibility. And you would think if you're convicted of a felony, that would be, if not just extremely detrimental, the death blow for the person running for president who is just determined to be a convicted felon. But the problem with the Democrats is they have no credibility. When people ask, yes, but convicted of what? Convicted of falsifying an internal document that nobody else saw or gave a damn about. It's not like a rape. It's not like a murder. It's not like a major embezzlement. It's like nothing. It wouldn't even be a crime in most places. It wouldn't even be a misdemeanor. So the Democrats have constructed this elaborate way of getting Donald Trump. And we'll be talking about that in this show. Whether it's the Atlanta case, dumb. No credibility to that prosecutor. She's fighting for her life just to continue to be a prosecutor. In New York, just mess. One mess after another. A civil suit where there are no damages. Everybody that Trump lent money to was repaid. They're not complaining. And yet the judge there, the judge there, Engoron, came up. No, this is Judge Engoron in the civil suit, came up with $450 million. So he'd have to run around getting,
So that Trump would have to scramble to pay this massive fine just so that he would have then the right to appeal that conviction.
And then we go to Bragg, who's a DA in Manhattan, and then he constructs a house of cards that are nothing. And then we go to Jack Smith, who wasn't even properly appointed, and then he's got a classified documents case. This is in trouble in Florida. And then we go to D.C., and that case, the so-called January 6th case, is postponed indefinitely and almost surely won't happen before the election. If Trump wins the election, it all goes away. The credibility, and the last thing is, what's the credibility of a party that has been telling you, has your Homeland Security person been saying, we have control of the southern border. There's no problem. And then before the election, Terry, they completely reversed their policy where they said there was no problem, and now there is.
Right.
So does the Democratic Party
to your point, I want
have any credibility?
Yeah, to your point. I mean, what did we hear from Joe Biden? He says, give me the power, give me the authority, right? He was saying, pass that bill that the Republicans are holding up in the Senate. Give me the authority. I want to close the border. Well, all of a sudden this week, guess what, Jeff? A ferry came down and gave Joe Biden the authority because all of a sudden he discovered that he could just issue an executive order. Oh, I guess he had the authority all along, that he really didn't need that bill that would have allowed 5,000 illegal immigrants to come in every day before they enacted or closed the border.
And to top it all off, does Joe Biden at 81 have the mental and physical acuity to be president of the United States, a very demanding job, for 4 more years? Hell no. Does he have it even for 4 more days? And how do we know that? Open your eyes, watch him, listen to him.
Well, and let's remember, we're bouncing around too much. I want to keep a little bit of continuity here.
Okay.
You were talking about how the cases brought against Trump are falling apart. Well, Bragg got the conviction. That's true. But as we've said, in other cases, it's falling apart. And here also this week, a win for Trump. A judge in the Georgia, this is the Fani Willis, and we learned about her having a love affair with a prosecutor that she hired, and they were going on vacations together. So now she's under investigation about the use of funds, and a Georgia appeals court put a stay on that case until they could determine whether Fani Willis needs to be removed as the prosecutor in that case. So that's fallen apart. The idea, Jeff, in the big picture, that you have these local prosecutors, Fani Willis, Alvin Bragg, the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, bringing these cases up has raised in the minds of many people across the country, a lot of the people that have donated to the Trump campaign this year, raised the question of whether or not this is a conspiracy by the Biden campaign, by the Biden Department of Justice, to run the Department of Justice as a get Trump operation. Now, coincidentally, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, testified before the House Judiciary Committee earlier this week. He was questioned by Matt Gaetz, the Republican congressman, who Gaetz brings up the number 3 guy at the Department of Justice, which is a dream job for a prosecutor to have gone that high in your career. He leaves that position and joins what? A strategic, a powerful law firm? No. He goes and joins Alvin Bragg's prosecution in New York City, which is like going from the world champions in baseball to join a minor league team. And Matt Gaetz questioned the Attorney General on that, and isn't that just a bit fishy?
Colangelo makes this remarkable downstream career journey from the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then pops up in Alvin Bragg's office to go get Trump. And you're saying that's just a career choice that was made that has nothing to do with the lawfare coordinated by the DOJ.
I'm saying it's false. I did not dispatch Mr. Colangelo.
All right, and as Garland says, the Attorney General Garland says he had nothing to do with that. And Gaetz goes, well, okay, it's a dangerous conspiracy theory to make that case that you guys are behind this prosecution. Here's what Gaetz follows up with.
Told us that it's a dangerous conspiracy theory to allege that the Department of Justice is communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump. You can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fani Willis' office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
You make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about.
So, Jeff, that was a hearing that went on for probably close to 3 hours, but Matt Gaetz's questioning was selected by a lot of people as far as nailing the Attorney General and saying, hey, if nothing happened, fine, just give us the documents of your correspondence. What's your take?
Merrick Garland came into the job of Attorney General for the state of Illinois to give the Democrat Party credibility. There was a man who was highly respected for decades as a federal appellate judge who was nominated to the Supreme Court, was embittered because he didn't get a hearing, and now he's frittered away that decade or more of credibility by going ahead and what we just saw. He made here Gaetz puts it all on the line and says to him, look, if you're right that there was no conspiracy, you and others at the DOJ have not been communicating with Fani Willis, have not communicating with Colangelo in the Bragg case, have not been communicating at all with Angoran in the civil case that tied up Trump for $450 million of damages that were non-existent. If nothing's there, Attorney General, just give us the documents. Tell us you'll give it to us today, produce them tomorrow. If you only got 2 documents and they don't make my case, you win. But if you got a box or 2 boxes or 3 boxes of documents showing this correspondence, these communications between you, this conspiracy, which you said is a conspiracy, is in fact a conspiracy to get Donald Trump, you lose. It's your choice. And what does he say? Oh, well, submit your thing and we'll talk about it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we'll send it up through the bureaucratic ranks, and, maybe by the time you're 55, we might have a response to you. I mean, it's ridiculous in the response that if you want to disprove the conspiracy, then say, fine, we'll gather the correspondence that DOJ has with these local prosecutors, and you will find that there's nothing there. Feast on these documents with no evidence of any communications.
We all remember Jerry Maguire, show me the money. Now when they talk about Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, they'll say, show me the documents. And he says, nope, not going to do it. Not going to do it. Why? What are you afraid that they will show? Show me the documents. That should be the phrase that rings out during the next 5 months.
We have to remember, too, Jeff, one of the prosecutions being brought, in this case by the DOJ, not a local prosecutor, is going after Trump. Remember, they raided Trump's home, Mar-a-Lago, and they gathered the documents they said you had no right to have. Now, because he had been the president, he has the authority, at least many argue, to declassify documents, and therefore he had the right to have these documents, so says Trump and his team. What do we find out after they raid Mar-a-Lago and after DOJ, after Merrick Garland appoints Jack Smith to be a special prosecutor? We find out that Joe Biden himself has all kinds of documents, not just at his house, but in like 3 or 4 locations. He was never the president when he had these documents. And they had that from the time he was in the Senate and the time when he was vice president. He did not have the power to declassify these documents. And yet what happens? Is he on trial now for documents that he didn't deserve? No, the special prosecutor, Robert Hur, says Joe Biden is too feeble to participate in his own defense, so we're going to opt not to prosecute Biden for having these documents because he's too feeble to participate in his own defense. Correspondingly, his campaign said, but he's not too feeble to be president for 4 more years. So the question now has been raised by former Attorney General Edwin Meese in an article, Meese, Attorney General under Ronald Reagan, that maybe this whole appointment of Smith, the prosecutor against Trump that was appointed by Merrick Garland, maybe he wasn't adequately appointed. And that came up in the House hearing this week as Congressman Massey questions whether Garland had the right to even appoint Jack Smith.
The question presented is whether private citizen Jack Smith lacks authority to represent the United States.
No, I'm not
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden?
No, he was not.
Was he confirmed by the Senate?
No, he was not.
When was the special counsel statute passed?
There is no special counsel statute. There was an independent counsel statute that was expired.
So it expired. So what gives you the authority to appoint a special counsel? You've created an office in the U.S. government that does not exist without authorization from Congress.
The matter that you're talking about whether somebody can have an employee of the Justice Department serve as special counsel has been adjudicated.
You appealed, let me interrupt for a second, because you appealed to a regulation, a rule, whereas the Constitution says shall be established by law.
Yeah.
So a question about whether Garland even has the authority to appoint a counsel. This is, I would say, a jump ball. It sounds intriguing. Personally, I can't, from what I've heard, it seems to me some valid arguments on both sides. We'll have to see how that goes.
Well, look, the important thing is this case in Florida now, handled by Eileen Cannon, the so-called classified documents case against Donald Trump, will not be heard and will not go to trial before the election. Instead, we're going to have a big hearing coming up. It's going to be extensive. The judge there is going to allow non-parties, which is highly unusual, to come in and participate in the hearing. And part of that hearing is going to deal with the issues you've just been talking about, and which is if you didn't have the power to make the appointment, Attorney General Meese, well, then nothing else can come of it. Eventually, that has to go away because the person who's making these charges was not properly appointed. We have the rule of law. That's what Democrats have been saying. Look at January 6th, we have the rule of law. Time and time again now, it appears the Democratic Party has not followed the rule of law, whether it's in Atlanta, whether it's in Manhattan, whether it's in a civil case, whether it's in a criminal case. They simply don't follow the rule of law. They trumped this all up, no pun intended, and they were talking about having election interference by Donald Trump. But now it appears the real election interference has come from the Democratic Party with these state lawsuits, which don't amount to much. People know who know the law. The federal sphere of the law in the United States is way more reliable, way more trustworthy than these state courts that often aren't much more than the Democratic Party machine here in Illinois and New York. And
you know, Jeff, we got to point out, remind people a couple of things, and they've heard it in other news reports. Trump in May, thanks in large part to his conviction and the outrage of the American people about the use of our Department of Justice as a political tool. Now, people might say that's not true, that's not factual. Merrick Garland would say that's not factual. But it is the perception among many, millions of people across the country. And we know that because Trump ended up raising $300 million after his conviction, or for the month of May. But the great preponderance of that came after last week's conviction. And so there is an outrage across the country. And as we heard earlier in the show, a lot of those donors they found had never given to any campaign before, and now they have. So whether I can't say, you can't say for sure that this is a conspiracy by the Bidens and DOJ, but it sure smells like it. And as we say, if it walks and talks like a duck, it may be a duck. Now, that's the perception, and we also say perception is reality, and that's what the Biden campaign has to be putting up with. Now, we are in a very competitive race, as everyone knows, and Jeff is going to give us kind of a breakdown because, folks, when you look at the 50 states, we already know how the great preponderance of these are going to go. California's going for Biden. Hawaii's going for Biden. Texas is going for Trump. It comes down to a handful of states. Jeff, what do you know? And is there any difference that we can ascertain in these races in the key states? There's 4 key states since the conviction of Trump last week.
Look, Fox people will criticize Fox, people will criticize MSNBC, CNN, take their sides. But Fox reported 2 days ago and backed it up with data on where we are in the race for president of the United States. What is the electoral projection at this point? It is right now, as we tape this, as of June 6th, Donald Trump 251 electoral votes, Biden 241, toss-up 46. So those 46 electoral votes in 4 states will determine, does Trump extend his lead from 251 to the number needed to win, 270, or can Biden turn it around? Well, let's take a look at those toss-up states. Pennsylvania, Trump leading by 2.3 percentage points, and there are 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. So you take Trump 251, which he has now called essentially, even though some of those are close, but as of today, June 6th, they're called for Trump, 251. He picks up Pennsylvania. He picks up 19 more. It's over. Pennsylvania is that decisive. Now, I'm not saying he wins for sure. It's a 2.3% lead, but that's in a good position. You'd rather be in the position of Donald Trump than Joe Biden. Take Arizona, another toss-up state. 11 electoral votes. Trump is winning by 4 points. Wisconsin, he's just barely winning in Wisconsin. Trump is 0.1. We still have a lot to play, but if he keeps that lead in Wisconsin, if he keeps the 4-point lead in Arizona, you take those 2 states, 21 votes, he wins just with those 2, even if he doesn't win Pennsylvania. If he wins Arizona, which gives him 11 votes, and he wins Nevada, that's 6 votes, and he's winning in both those states by more than 4 percentage points, that's only 17. But wait a second, what if he flips New Hampshire, which is being called currently, I believe, for Biden? If he flips New Hampshire, I think that's 5 electoral votes, he wins. If he flips Minnesota, which right now Biden's winning, but only by 0.6 points. There are 4 states that are highly competitive that are now being called for Trump. Except for one of those 4 isn't, that's Minnesota, but North Carolina is. Georgia is being called for Trump. Michigan is being called for Trump. So the point is, overall, folks, we're throwing a lot of states, a lot of numbers at you. Donald Trump, the former president, the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party for president, is in very good shape as of June 6th. After all of this that we've just been discussing, all of this lawfare, after all of that, he's in very good shape. And where is the Democratic Party? Well, people are wondering, as we have the run up to the debate on June 27, will Biden even stay that long? And can Biden survive that debate and then go ahead and get the nomination of the Democratic Party in
let's
July?
insert, because you're alluding to it, there is some people who have said that the idea that we had this early debate in June was purposely put there, I'm just repeating what some people have speculated, by Democrats who want Biden off the ticket. And they think by maybe having it before the convention instead of after the convention, as we have always had these debates, if Biden really just falls on his face, he will be pushed off and they will have to find someone else. Even if that were to happen, then the question is who. And, Kamala Harris, the vice president, would make the case that it should be her. Although I think for the Democrats, that would be a disaster, given that she has exposed herself to be a fairly vacuous person who is a horrible communicator, arguably even worse of a communicator than Joe Biden. So the last thing we should also say this week that's kind of a good thing for Donald Trump is talking about legal problems. Hunter Biden is now on trial for a gun charge, and many people think he will be convicted. Now, how does this play in the presidential race? I don't know, but it can't be a positive for Joe Biden.
Well, let me correct myself. I said the Democratic Party convention was in July. That's the Republican convention coming up in Milwaukee. The Democratic Party convention is, of course, August 19 through August 22. But the thing of it is, they've just decided the Democratic Party can't really wait to make that nomination in the August 19 to August 22 period, because Ohio needs the decision for their ballot by August 7th. So now the Democrats are talking about having sort of a virtual convention, because they're going to have to nominate their choice if they want to be competing in Ohio prior to August 7th. So they got that problem to deal with. And really, the recent report in the Wall Street Journal, from talking with, I think, something like 45 individuals who are close to the president, Joe Biden, basically they question his mental acuity currently. And we can see that in the way he conducts himself at press conferences. We can see how he walks. He doesn't seem to know where he's going in the right direction. He stops in mid-sentence and talks about something else. Folks, you don't need reporters to tell you this. Just look. I mean, it's not an occasional slip. We all do that in TV. I just made a slip now when I referred to the Democratic convention as being in July instead of August. It's not just a slip. It's, does he have the mental acuity when he's answering questions? Can he answer questions? We've all seen the props. He doesn't have a note or two. He has directions of cards that he's reading from, who to call, the names of the reporters, the topics. So enough. The question is, could Donald Trump possibly lose the election on November 5? Just take a look at the issues. The issues right now, border issues, immigration, so important. 8 million people coming across our borders in the last 4 years, undisputed, essentially not vetted. Whether it's China, whether it's the security risk from China, from Iran, from a whole host of security risks. We're not even checking these people. We don't even know the security risks we have. Border issue, that has to go.
Let me insert that as you alluded to this article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal, not only is it there, and people are talking behind the scenes about how Biden is slipping, and the article mentioned that sometimes he mutters so quietly people can't understand what he's saying in the middle of meetings, or that he will stop and pause in the middle of having a meeting at the White House where it's like his brain fell into neutral. He's really showing signs of aging.
We're running out of time, so let me just tease what we can talk about next week. We mentioned the border issue, so problematic for Joe Biden. Inflation, 40-year high, so problematic. Crime, wars, the Hamas-Israel war, the Ukraine-Russia war. Would either of these wars have occurred if Donald Trump were there as President of the United States? People are asking
Jeff,
that.
Look, let's insert, what's the issue? We know what Trump is saying. Trump says he would finish the border. He's going to keep the tax cuts. What is Joe Biden's agenda for a second term? We haven't heard it, except for he's not Trump.
Now, here's his agenda: abortion. He will be running on abortion. He will be running on January 6th. He will be saying he's the guy to protect the United States.
But how do we get to peace and prosperity that people need? Okay, we are out of time. Folks, give us your comments. Jeff and I will be back in the future to discuss other things, and we'll keep you appraised of how this all breaks out. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend, and we salute those on June the 6th who fought in France.